Math lesson 63, least common multiple. So today we're going to be talking about least common multiple, or I'll probably shorten that most often to LCM. All right, so least common multiple. Now, least common multiple, we can figure out what that means by just looking at the words. So least means smallest, common means matching. So when you see least common, think the smallest matching multiple. Now, a multiple is really just when we take a number and we multiply it to get another number. All right, so let's start with, let me change my color here. Let's start with the number 3. Okay, if I take the number 3 and I multiply it by 1, I get 3. If I take number 3 and I multiply it by 2, I get 6. If I multiply it by 3, I get 9. By 4, I get 12. By 5, I get 15. Okay, so what I have done here is I have listed the multiples of 3, or you can think of it as like your multiplication chart. The results when you take a number and you multiply it, that is a multiple. All right, so let's do the same thing with 5. Take 5, multiply it by 1, I get a 5. Multiply it by 2, I get 10. Multiply it by 3, I get 15. By 4, I get 20, etc. Okay, you could keep going, but we're actually going to stop because you should have noticed that we have a matching multiple already. Okay, we have a 15 here and we have a 15 here. Okay, so as soon as you find a multiple in both rows that is matching, you can stop listing the multiples because you have found the least common multiple or the smallest matching one. Okay, now something to note is if there were to be a matching multiple a little bit earlier, that would be the lowest common one. So there can be more than one common multiple, but what we're going to be looking for is the smallest one. All right, and in your notebooks, you're going to write out these lists of multiples, and then at the end, I would like you to write LCM equals 15, just for easy finding and for easy marking for yourself later. Okay, so find the smallest matching multiple in your list of multiples. Now, you can find the least common multiple in a group of 3 numbers. So here we can take our 3 numbers, we'll list the multiples, and you could even think about the multiples kind of like if you've learned in previous grades, you probably have what's called skip counting, or like counting by 2s, counting by 3s. That's another way to think of multiples. So really here, when I list the multiples of 4, it's kind of just like counting by 4s. So 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. Okay, 6, 12, 18, 24, 8, 16, 24. And notice I have a matching multiple here already, but we need one that's matching between all of them. But if I go back up to my 4 list, you should notice that if I just go one more, I have a 24 there as well. And that is the smallest matching multiple between them. So the LCM, least common multiple, of 4, 6, and 8 is 24. Okay, so you can do the least common multiple with more than 2 numbers, and I think a couple of your questions in your textbook are going to ask you to do that. Now, here's where we get to how does this relate to fractions? Oop, thought I had my highlighter. How does this relate to fractions? Well, you're going to use the least common multiple to help you find common denominators, okay? And specifically to find the lowest common denominator. Okay, so here I have 2 fractions, and what you're going to be asked to do in your textbook is to find the lowest common denominator, or the lowest bottom number that would be the same. Okay, and here's how you do that. You do that by setting up your list of multiples for the least common multiple. Okay, and we already did this on the other page, but I will just quickly do it. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 5, 10, 15, our LCM, as we saw earlier, was 15. Okay, so what you're going to do to find a common denominator is take these two fractions and you're going to make equivalent fractions with 15 as the denominator. All right, because our lowest common denominator is going to be 15. A lowest common denominator can be found using the LCM. All right, so all you have to do to make equivalent fractions like we learned last time is multiply. Okay, so we're going to take the denominator of 5 and you think to yourself, what times 5 gets me a 15? Well, 3 does. Okay, so 5 times 3 gets you a 15. And then just like we learned last time, you can't just multiply the denominator, you have to multiply the numerator as well for the fraction to be equivalent. So we have to do 3 times 3 as well to get a 9. And then for 2/3, 3 times 5 gets you a 15, which means we also have to, I'm running out of space here, hopefully you get the idea, 2 times 5 to get a 10. So now we have equivalent fractions, but they have the same denominator. They have the lowest common denominator. And then I just want to show you one more example here, is that sometimes you'll have fractions like this. So if you're asked to find the lowest common denominator here, you could set that up. We've got a 5 and a 10. So I can start listing multiples, 5, 10, 15, 20, etc. But then you'll notice that right away we have a matching number. All right, so actually in this example, when you make this into a fraction with a common denominator, you don't even have to change the 3/10 because the least common multiple or the lowest common denominator is going to be 10 already. Okay, so I can actually just rewrite that fraction. And the only fraction that I actually need to change is this one by multiplying by 2. And we end up with 4/10. So just to be aware that sometimes the least common multiple can actually be the first number. So the number multiplied by 1, and you might only have to change one of your fractions. So hopefully that makes it clear for you. As always, you can chat with me if you have any questions.